Welcome to VPG's Virtual Water Cooler Chat Podcast, a platform that features professionals across a variety of industries and promotes growth mindset principles with a central pillar of championing the achievements of women. Our conversations explore a wide spectrum of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, creating a vibrant mosaic that enriches our collective understanding and strengthens our commitment to growth and empowerment. This episode of Virtual Water Cooler Chat Podcast features Jaime Siegel, the founder, CEO, and general counsel for Cerebral Assets, an advisory firm that provides guidance related to intellectual property matters for global industry participants. With over 25 years of experience, he advises global industry leaders on IP strategy, licensing, litigation, and valuation. Jaime also serves as Global Director of Licensing for Open Invention Network and serves as a National Trustee of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum and a dedicated advocate for Teen Cancer America. Let's get started.
Hey, Jaime, how are you doing?
Good, Ashley. How have you been?
I've been doing a lot of stuff, and including doing podcasting. Well, I have never thought about doing this in a million years, but it's really kind of fun, actually.
Well, podcasting is, of course, the natural evolution from law firm practice.
Yes, of course. And not one, but three.
You know, Ashley, I've reinvented myself, I think, 3 or 4 times over my career. And reinventing yourself can be a lot of fun, a little scary, some challenges, but always keeps things fresh, keeps your mind moving.
We're going to talk about your fun journey, So thank you, first of all, thank you so much for saying yes to this. And it's been a long time since we worked on cases together. I was like, wonder what that Jaime Siegel is doing. So maybe I'll send him an email. And you said yes.
Great. Well, no one's ever accused me of not wanting to talk. So.
Well, I've seen some of your podcasts too.
The world has too many quiet people. I try to make up for their lack of contribution with maybe an over contribution.
Well, I kind of follow you, and one of the things that we'll talk about that a lot. The one that I'm most curious is, do you speak Chinese or Mandarin?
I speak very little Chinese. I know how to get a cold beer. I know how to get cold water. I know how to eat numerous things. And most importantly, I know how to tell street vendors to leave me alone.
Oh, those are important things.
That's it. Google Translate makes up for the rest. It's really, if you haven't tried it, the new Google Translate app, which provides a split screen, so you could literally put your phone on the table and my Chinese counterpart will be seeing Chinese and I'll be seeing English on the same. It's absolutely amazing. The need to travel around with people that can speak a language is just really dissipated.
Well, one time I went to Japan to cover some deposition for my TC because they have it at the U.S. consulate in Tokyo, and we were in an Uber. I guess the Japanese were way advanced because I didn't know how to communicate with the driver. And then when I said something, he just pulled out the phone and then translate what I said to Japanese. I was like, that was pretty cool. So
it's a long way from my having to learn out of necessity how to communicate with Tokyo cab drivers because I couldn't even get to a hotel. And being a 6'7" white guy, it was really eye-opening when at 11 o'clock at night, I go to grab onto a taxi's door and they'd turn around, see me, and drive off.
Oh, wow. Are you 6'7"?
I am 6'7".
Oh my God, I'm only 5'2". If I ever go by and see you in person, I'm like this much, and you're gonna this much.
You kidding me, Ashley? I'm one of the biggest IP lawyers in the business.
How tall is Lionel? Is it 6'3"?
Yeah, he's probably about 6'3".
He's about 6'3". Okay. He's just shorty compared to you. Okay.
Yeah. That's the size of a runt in our family.
I see. Well, first thing first, I wanted to chat with you about, really curious, how did you get yourself into this whole IP career and as an attorney? Have you ever thought about being an attorney? Is it something that you really wanted to do when growing up?
So that's an interesting origin story. I grew up a poor kid in Queens, New York. Our idea of medical insurance was never going to the same doctor twice. We didn't have a lot. My dream was to be a pilot. And then I got too tall and got glasses, so I couldn't be a pilot. So I figured next thing is I'm going to design airplanes. And I achieved that goal. I wound up being an engineer at Grumman Aerospace on Long Island, and I worked on almost every naval aircraft there was. And then I met my then girlfriend, now long-term wife, and she was going off to medical school. And back as a poor kid, I was, wow, doctors, they make a lot of money. They don't anymore, but back long time ago they did. I said, maybe I should do that. I said, maybe I'll go to medical school. And my girlfriend said, you'll never get in. I said, maybe I'll go to law school. She goes, well, any idiot can go to law school. I said, great, I'm doing that. So my goal was actually, I wanted to be a trial lawyer. So I like to talk, I like to debate. I view that as fun. So I thought trial law would be great. Being 6'7" was great for courtroom presence. But the area I actually wanted to do was air crash disasters because of my aviation background. And I went to night law school and I wound up actually getting a job as a paralegal at the top aviation firm in the world. They were lead counsel on all the biggest air crashes. So I worked on Pan Am 103 and Korea 007 and the TWA Malta hijacking and all these really cool cases. But I didn't go to Harvard for law school. I went to Brooklyn Law School at night because I worked 4 jobs going to law school. And they made clear because I didn't go to Harvard, there was no career there for me. So turns out that was the best favor they ever did for me because you know how much business they've had in the last 30 years? Not so much. Thankfully, which is great. My wife said, you need to go to IP, you need to do IP law because that's where the money is. I wanted to be a trial lawyer. Frankly, the subject matter didn't really matter, but she was right. And I was a paralegal at Philip Morris International. And I asked their patent guys, hey, can I go meet with your patent lawyers? I'd love to find more about it. And went to this law firm, Fish and Neve. I didn't even know who they were. And I wound up going to Burgers and Beers with 5 partners at Fish and Neve at Billy's on First in Manhattan. Over beers and burgers, they offered me a job. So that was how I got started in IP. I figured, you're going to start at the top. So I wound up working at Fish and Neve for several years. My first year, I wound up with 2 trials for 6 months. I was taking depositions my first year at Fish and Neve because I had a partner who will go unnamed who was an alcoholic who decided not to come out to Phoenix for a deposition because for whatever reason he couldn't travel. And really that just launched a career. That's how I wound up in IP. And it turns out I loved it. And I liked the combination of technology and law. But fundamentally, I was always a business guy, right? That was really my approach. I was always an entrepreneur. I had my own business since I was in high school. I had my own business. That kind of tracks the origin story that tracks through the whole rest of my career.
Well, I'm immigrant from Hong Kong, so we took Pan Am to come to the States.
Oh, yeah.
That was the day. Wow, that's really interesting. And you don't have anyone in your family that is actually in law, right?
Well, so yes and no. So we had a not poor side of the family that lived on Central Park in Manhattan. They were our rich cousins. My great uncle was a judge for 60 years in New York City. All 3 of his kids were lawyers. And one cousin was the city comptroller for New York City, who was also a lawyer, and he was elected as comptroller. So we had a segment of the family that used to pass down their hand-me-downs to us, as the white trash component of the family. But I didn't really have anybody to use as a model in terms of lawyers, right? I didn't know much. When I went to law school, LA law was all the rage. I mean, when I started law school, law firm starting pay was at the tier 1 firms was probably under $40,000 a year back then. By the time I graduated,
so much now.
well, when I graduated in 1992, starting pay was $93,500 a year, which that was a lot of money, right? That was a lot of money back then. And that transition had happened mid-law school. Just as with my wife, the transition happened the other way. When she started medical school, doctors and OBGYN could make $1 million a year, no problem. By the time she graduated, well, I'll put it in perspective. My daughter, who's a 3rd year at Norton Rose in New York, she out-earned my wife as a first-year lawyer. My wife was a solo practitioner OBGYN in the New York metropolitan area, and our daughter out-earned my wife in all but 2 of her entire career years as a first-year lawyer, as opposed to a doctor. So, but look, money, when you grow up poor, one of the things I don't want to be poor anymore. So while you should never make decisions in your career simply about money, money is a powerful driver. Right. So, because I've been poor, I don't want to be poor again. So that's always been, for me personally, it's always been a big motivator. Now I consider myself to be fairly philanthropic. It's one of the greatest successes, putting aside all the professional accomplishments I have, was the idea that I can be philanthropic and I can impact other people's lives in a very positive way, I think is really important. And it all comes back to, to give back where I couldn't get. I couldn't give before, I was receiving. So now I can give back, which is a, big driver.
That's really interesting that when you're talking about, because I Well, never assume, because you have some very successful career positions in like really important companies that you were like in a leadership position. So prior to this, I would never have thought that you were coming from a humble beginning. I'm nowhere near where you are in terms of accomplishment, but I really think that like my parents came when they had nothing. We used to live in Virginia and then we moved to Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, in the middle of the Midwest in the 80s. And that was not anywhere. I mean, I don't see a lot of me around.
Well, yeah, it was the burgeoning Chinese community in Lawrence,
exactly. There was a lot of racial discrimination around.
Yeah.
We have experienced a couple of things, but my parents, they opened a Chinese restaurant and we work. So my schedule was like school, work, and then like, oh crap, I don't know how I'm going to put this on my resume. After I graduate, can I just be like waitress? Hostess? How do I actually take it to the next level? So then I got some attorneys and mentors that were professor. And so one of them is actually a Harvard Law graduate. He's one of my lay professor. For whatever reason, he saw a lot in me and he wanted me to go to law school. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I was really thinking about doing like foreign policy research, which makes no money.
No, it doesn't.
You go IP for money? I was like, oh, I'm going for ideal. And then, so I came to Washington, D.C. after all this. And he had been trying to persuade me to go to law school. I'm like, no. So I did master's instead for East Asian languages and cultures and political science. But I did like have a lot of connection from the university because I was working. Somehow I carved out additional time to work at the Center for East Asian Studies and with the Kansas business community. And I do like business research for my professor. So he really opened up a lot of network. And for my master's thesis, I don't really tell this story a lot, is that somehow he's a lawyer, right? So he knows all the loopholes and everything. So he ended up doing visiting professorship in other university more than when he was staying at the University of Kansas. And then he ended up winning a mentor award. And he's not even there. I know, he was really amazing. And he has he speaks Chinese, fluent Chinese. This was a kind of a funny story when I was doing my master's. Right before I get into my master program, he had me go into his office and he would say, hey, I need someone because I was living with my parents. And we didn't come for money. So they really cannot afford to pay for my school as well as lodging. So my professor asked me, would you like to house sit my place? I'm like, no. We live in a small town, I don't know what this is going to look like. And I said, but let me go back and check with my parents first. Very typical Chinese, Yeah. And then, especially when my parents own a Chinese restaurant, it just seems very not cool. Yeah. And then at some point, he goes like, listen, if you're not going to do this, somebody else will. I want to give this as your scholarship because I know when you're writing your thesis, you need to have separation from people.
Right.
You need to have a peace of mind. And so that's what he contributed to my, so he had me house sit his place. And he was in Saratoga Springs when he was doing that. Just one of the most amazing lawyers that I have actually met even before I enter into IP litigation. So I thought that we've never really talked about that. So I just thought I would let you know.
It's really amazing. First off, one of those facts someone might be surprised to learn about you is that I actually cooked Chinese food in a restaurant when I was in college.
Really?
Yeah.
What's your favorite? What is your best, your specialty?
You know what? I cook stuff. I grew up around Chinatown. So we used to go to Chinatown. We were the only white people in Chinatown. So I actually have my whole life has been very closely tied to Chinese culture. The stuff I cooked in upstate New York was stuff I would never eat. Sweet and sour. The stuff that the old American Chinese egg rolls, sweet and sour, egg foo young, all the junk that wasn't at the time I thought was just junk food. Now it turns out I go to China quite a bit. There's actually some really great sweet and sour dishes over in China. Really good when it's done right. But Asia's always been a very strong interest of mine. I mean, I never got on a plane until I was on a plane once other than when I interviewed for jobs after college. I had never been on a plane other than for a high school graduation trip. To your point, the story you were just telling, we all get mentors. I think most successful people have at some point to their career a mentor who's very impactful on how they approach things, right? Whether it changes their priorities, whether it just gives them a new approach into their career or to think about new avenues, right? That mentor is really pretty key. I think most successful people have those mentors. For me, it was the former managing partner of Kenyon & Kenyon, who I worked for, Rich Grisalfi, who passed quite a bit while ago, over 10 years ago. I started out where I worked for him and I learned a ton from him and really shaped on who I was as a lawyer and as a person. And then when I went to Sony, I became his biggest client. Right. And we wound up, I think, enriching each other's lives in that way. But having the mentor, the story that you just told about having that mentor who really had an eye, he knew better than you, right? He was trying to get you to make this is going to be a good thing. You should do this, but you needed to be convinced, right? But he stuck with it because he cared enough to do that, right? And people who are lucky enough to get someone else who cares enough about them to really help them make smart decisions is, we're both pretty lucky in that regard.
And I think also seeing something, especially when I was like younger, English is my second language, and I didn't believe in myself. Like my parents didn't know better. They didn't have college education and they didn't have like high school education. So I wasn't quite sure exactly how this was all going to work. And I defended my thesis, and he was just really amazing in the sense that he sort of pegged my every move before I even know it. And when I had to defend my thesis, he was on my committee and he flew out on his own dime and basically hear my defense, and he knew that I was going to be working the night before. So he called me. He was like, "Are you at a restaurant?" I'm like, "Yes." "Go home. You need to start doing your lit review." I'm like, "Okay." And then so I went, and he also knew that I was going to be like really early and sitting outside of the room that I was going to be defending my thesis. And he came an hour early, and then he was like, "Let's go in and do your lit review." So we did that. And at the end of it, he was going to be like the second chair because he wasn't there. So, and then the other professor at the end was like my thesis committee chair was like, after I finished defending, and they sent me out in the hallway. I'm sitting there, I was like, "Oh my God, I hope I pass." And they came back, and thesis chair said to me, was like, "You did amazing. We have one change." I'm like, "What's the change?" "We're going to move him to be the chair. I'm going to be second chair." That doesn't ever happen, right?
Wow, that's amazing.
That is amazing. All right, let's talk about, you have so many different adventures, and then we talk about, and one of the things that he talked about is nothing venture, nothing gains. In law, many of the legal professionals I know are very risk averse.
Yeah.
That's part of the, profession.
It is, so, thankfully.
I know, because liability, insurance, You have done so many different things. I was like, oh my God, everything that I'm seeing on your LinkedIn is like still present. So you're on the board of trustee of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum. It's different from the foundation.
Correct.
And then you are also recently like the advisor of Agility. You have your own company, Cerebral Assets, which I am dying to find out about what you do, and so many other things. So, Jaime, spill the beans.
Yeah, so
you know what you do?
Most people in life pick a path and they stick to that path and they run the course, right? That's most people. I call them sheeple. Most people go through life as sheeple. And it doesn't matter what your career. You could be a fireman, you could be a lawyer, you could be a doctor, whatever it is. You focus on your one thing and you go and you get you support your family, and life becomes very repetitive and mundane. That's fine for most people, which is great because everybody can't be, frankly, like me. That'd be too much. The world would explode. You couldn't do that. But what I learned early on is that I used to be extraordinarily shy as a kid. I was very shy. I had a lot of insecurities. And I won't go into the story about how that changed. But when that changed, what I realized is that, you know what? I'm not afraid to talk to anybody. And I am going to just be the best I can be at what I'm doing. And the true meritocracy perspective I feel like I'm going to do what I do the best I can do. So I'm never going to, I think most people go through lives working for companies, and the best way, the most important thing is preserving their job, right? Whether you're at a law firm or in a company, you don't want to get laid off. Well, guess what? I was part of the first lawyers ever in New York City to get laid off at Fish and Neve. It was the first time lawyers had ever been laid off. It took me 4 days to get another job because that's just part of life, right? When someone else controls your destiny, you're just a number. It doesn't matter what you think your relationship is. You owe them an obligation of loyalty when they're paying you. But as soon as they stop paying you, you're an earner for them. And if whatever reason it doesn't work out with their model, that's fine. That was one of the most positive things that happened in my career, was getting laid off from Fish and Neve, because I went to Kenyon & Kenyon from there, and I learned there was another way to practice law than what I learned there. And the way at Kenyon & Kenyon was frankly more to my style. It was more cowboy-like in terms of just free-spirited. And I remember the first day I started at Fish and Neve, a partner literally came up to me and asked me if I had any feelings of inadequacy because I went to Brooklyn Law School as opposed to Harvard. To which I looked down upon this shorter partner. I won't tell you the first thing I said to him, because let's just say I said something that most people wouldn't say to a partner at a law firm. But then I suggested that perhaps he should go see where the managing partner went to law school before they were to suggest such insecurities, because Charlie Smith was the managing partner and he went to Brooklyn.
Oh, wow.
Right? So to me, that really also, the arrogance of that was just, we went to Harvard or Yale, whatever it was, and, clearly you're lesser, right? That really impacted me. What really has shaped me and doing what I do and the way I do it is the idea that I never really cared or was concerned about being able to earn a living. And because I was never concerned about earning a living, it meant that I could make decisions and I could take risks that other people wouldn't do. Because what was the worst case? Oh my God, Sony fired me. I'd have to go earn a couple $1 million at a law firm as a partner. Oh no, what a terrible day. But that enabled me to give the advice that I truly thought was the best advice for my client, right? And to take risks and to do things that I wanted to have fun. I want to have fun. I want to keep on getting better at what I do. Even today, I want to learn something every day. I want to surround myself with interesting people, and I want to have fun, because if I'm not having fun, why do it? Life is such a drudgery for most people. People want to go off to I want this place to be the best place. I don't want to go off to a better place. I want this to be the best place. And because of that, I always took a view of living for today, because sometimes people are too much of a saver mindset, right? It's about what I'm going to plan for in the future. I want to enjoy now. And it means I want to do fun projects. It means when I thought the trademark folks had really cool exhibits, way better than the semiconductor patent guys. And I said, hey, I want to do some of the trademark work. And I walked in and did some trademark work. Or I wanted to represent rock bands. So I did pro bono at Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts and represented rock bands, right? Because it was fun. And really my quest to have fun and to not be bored. I would change jobs when I got bored. When I got bored, I would change jobs. So I wound up I worked at Fish, I worked at Kenyon, and about 7 years in, I decided, you know what? I wanted to go in-house, but I wasn't going to actively seek it. I was just open to it because I was working a lot. I mean, you working at Finnegan. I was going to work at 6 a.m. and coming home at 10 p.m. and I was traveling a lot and working really hard. But I also had 2 kids. Or at the time I had one daughter, and I didn't want to be an absentee parent either. And I certainly had my price where I was willing to be an absentee parent, but the law firms weren't hitting that price at the time. I mean, now it's different times, and I had a wife who was a professional who also earned an income. So I could afford to take that risk. I took like a 60% pay cut when I went from Kenyon to Sony. And I had to convince them to hire me because I explained to them my finances, right? Because I said, you're getting a bargain. They said, well, you don't get something for nothing. Which was fair. Yes. Luckily, the recruiter at Sony, her sister was an OBGYN. So she immediately said, yeah, if your wife's an OBGYN, of course you could take a salary hit. So what? That's fine. And I was doing it for other reasons. And that was, another great move. But it's Sony. Everything I did was also figuring out, how is Jamie going to have fun with what I'm doing? I need to be challenged. I can't be bored. I can't do the same thing. Some people are fine doing the same thing over and over again. Groundhog Day. Every day of their life is Groundhog Day. That's not me. I want to do something different every day.
Wow. How did you get from all of that to Cerebral Assets? I love the name.
Thank you.
How did you?
I'll give you an origin story of that.
Okay, let's do that.
Story. That's a crazy story.
I will give you an origin story of Virtual Patent Gateway.
This is insane. So my brother Brian, who's my business partner now, he was a business guy. He's not a lawyer. I was at Sony. He may have been at Sony also. He's a big business leader at Sony. And there was a pitch day in New York City. This is going back into the early 2000s. And it was a pitch day run by CBS MarketWatch. And this is, really early in the IP business. You had Jerry Hosier and Ray Nairo. Jerry Hosier that was the scope of the MPEs, was Jerome Lemelson, right? That's who started the MPE thing. Fish and Neve was against Lemelson, but I saw the business opportunity there. And we basically pitched, and I think it was like in 2002, an MPE. There were no MPEs. We pitched and we came up with the name Cerebral Assets to be an MPE. When we stood up in front of this room, we said, we need to raise money because we're going to buy patents and then we're going to run licensing programs to generate returns on those patents. Well, you could be too early on a lot of things. And we were just too early. People are like, wait, you want to do what? What? A what? A patent? Sorry, we don't understand you. And anyway, so we banked that name. We just always kept that name. I left Sony in 2013. I went to Acacia as EVP of licensing. So I owned the whole revenue line in a Nasdaq company, right? It was a business role. It wasn't a lawyer role. It was a great experience from business, but it was definitely not for me. I am not that the business wasn't for me. That environment wasn't for me. I'm a team builder. That wasn't the environment there. We parted ways. And what I decided was, I told my wife, I said two things. I said, number one is the only jerk I ever want to work for again is myself. I may have used more colorful language in that. And I said, would you give me a year? We had picked up our whole family and moved to California. I left that job within a year of moving to California, and she had retired as a physician. She said, sure, I trust you. You've never disappointed me. I'll give you a year. But here was the concept. 80% of valuation of companies is intangible assets, right? I've talked about this in numerous times. 50 years ago, it was the exact opposite. 80% tangible assets, 20% intangible. Now, today's economy, 80% intangible. If you look at any technology firm, a good chunk of that 80% is on intellectual property. And I challenge anybody, name me 5 people, name me 3 people who could advise you on intellectual property as an asset class on your balance sheet, as opposed to your patent lawyer who gets you patents, or your patent litigator who defends you or sues people on your patents. That's the legal side of it. But ultimately, the business side is what drives everything, right? That drives everything about business. This is all about business. Litigation and patents, those are all tools of business. I don't want to practice law anymore because too many handcuffs, right? My conflict review is really simple. Do I like you? Will you pay me? No conflict, right?
I love your conflict review procedure.
Right? That's the conflict review. It's on me to decide. I don't have a legal conflict. Is there going to create a business conflict? Is this going to impact a relationship with one client versus another? A lot of that is absolved by simple full disclosure with your clients, right? Let them tell you if they're fine with it or not. It's very different than if you're running a law firm where there's hard rules. So I wanted to start a business firm that focused on IP as an asset class. And that's great in theory, but what the hell did that mean? And I had to figure this out. I'm creating effectively this new Jamie, this next phase. And so we started out as doing consulting, right? And I went through, and actually my first money was made headhunting, moving a whole bunch of lawyers from Kenyon and Kenyon to Norton Rose Fulbright. Again, I'm a firm believer, Ashley, a life without stories is a really boring life. I can definitely have not had a boring life. A friend of mine, big lawyer, big partner, go unnamed, was concerned for me when I left Acacia, said, hey, go talk to this headhunter, one of the top headhunters in New York. We went to lunch. Turned out she had placed everybody I knew. And at the end of lunch, she said, hey, Jamie, forget about everything we just spoke about. I think I'd like you as my partner. I said, oh, never really thought about that. But timing being everything, I wound up connecting with her and we did all this big Kenyon movement, right? So that was my first money in IP consulting, was headhunting. But then I started advising folks on terms of development of portfolios, but not from a perspective of what's technically able to get, but from a business reason. Why make the investment? Why should you be doing this? And then it was, hey, you know what? I can help you. I want 10% of whatever I can reduce your legal fees by, because you know what? I think there's a lot of waste. And anytime your lawyer tells you need to pay an extension fee, that's not for your benefit. That's for their benefit.
Because you've been on both sides.
Right? To which my answer was, your lawyers need to deduct all those extension fees that were charged because that was for them, not for you, despite how they pitched it. The consulting business was growing, and I got attached with Open Invention Network really early, back in 2015. They're my longest standing client. I don't know if you're familiar with Open Invention Network, right? It's almost the exact polar opposite of what I do, which was being aggressive at licensing and strategic in terms of assertions. And here was open source. And we're licensing for free. Thankfully, I think someone said, wait, Jaime, to run licensing for open source? I don't know. And luckily, one of my former colleagues is on the board, and he said, I think he's going to be just fine at this. 10 years into this, the membership doubled from 2,000 to over 4,100. I think I've done pretty well at OIM, but it also shaped my thinking in terms of the concept of co-opetition, we call it, cooperating at the low end to compete at the higher end. And the idea of selling free, which, by the way, was the best training ground for sales ever, because selling free is extraordinarily hard. It's actually the hardest thing. It's even harder than raising money for a startup company, is selling free, because people don't trust free. If I'm raising money, people understand why I want to raise money. If I'm selling free, people want to say, why would you do that? And the challenge in that
with the Jaime brand.
Yeah, right. And so, but what I figured out really easily, hey, this is fantastic. I get to walk in people's offices with no hammer, not even a velvet hammer, not even gloves. It's purely unicorns and rainbows. I want to give you something for free. I have to explain to you why this is really good for you, but it really is, there's no hidden agenda. It really is free. And that really helped shape this last phase of my career, which is, first and foremost, my career is built on networking, right? Networking is everything. What you're doing right now, reaching out to me, these are all networking. Probably the most important formative skill of anybody who's entrepreneurial is networking. But understanding how to build that network in a very positive way, as opposed to, I have plenty of friends that were adversaries where, I kicked their butt. Then they want to hire me. They want to be my friend, right? So I have a lot of friends who were former adversaries, but it's different when you approach it not from an adversarial perspective, but from a helpful perspective. And it really has been really fantastic, because we can always reinvent ourselves. You're doing it right now, right? You're perpetually reinventing yourself. So I will tell you, we had a 3-year deviation from Cerebral. I kept OIN as a client, but my brother Brian and I, we were running a tech startup called FlipTix that was completely disruptive. Yeah, so that was disruptive to the whole ticking industry. We raised millions of dollars. We were, by March 2020, we had 14 full-time employees. We were going to be positive EBITDA. We were going to have I think it was a 20x increase in revenue from 2019 to 2020. And we were really knocking it out of the park. And then COVID hit and destroyed that. So we went back into the consulting Cerebral. And then I tripped into one of the most important parts that turns into one of the most important parts for our business, is that a friend asked me if I would broker their patent portfolio. They were going to sue. And I asked, just asking questions. I said, well, why would you sue for the amount of money they were looking for? And they were explaining it. I said, well, look, here's my thought about how I would do it if it were me. And the next day they called up and said, hey, I thought about our conversation. Would you want to broker this for me? And I got him a multiple of what he wanted within 6 months on a friendly deal, and realized, this is pretty good. So our brokerage business, Cerebral Assets, has a bunch of verticals. So our verticals at Cerebral, we do brokering. We're doing brokering. We've developed a tremendous network in China. I mean, we're representing the largest vape company, the largest insurance company, the largest packaging company, the largest e-commerce company. These are the largest panel company, the largest, just click off the list. These are all clients of ours now, in large part because we're going there. Right? A lot of Westerners are not going there. We're going there. And there's a guy named He Jing, who you may know. He Jing is the founder of Gen Law, GEN Law. He used to be an associate at Baker McKenzie when I met him when he was representing Sony. We've been partners on a lot of things, and he's just I am so grateful to He Jing and Gen Law for the introductions and the partnership they provide to us. But we also represent, we're the first patent broker ever hired by Toyota. We represented AT&T and HPE and Philips and all these other companies. And it's because of networking, right? We never advertise. And we do brokering, and we do sell-side brokering. We do buy-side brokering, which we do anonymously for unnamed clients, because I learned, once I moved into my first nice house, when you call a contractor, you never tell them you live in the nice neighborhood. You tell them you live in the lousy neighborhood, because that impacts pricing. Same thing with blind buying, right? There's all sorts of reasons why companies want to buy in blind, that they may not want to disclose where they're buying. They may not want to may want to have better pricing, or they just want to be secret about what they're doing in R&D. But the other piece, I've been a testifying witness. I mean, this year I've testified in 3 different cases already this year on licensing, liquidated damages, right? That's been nice business. Doesn't come close to the deal business, but it's a nice business and it keeps me connected with the litigation space, which I still have fun with. We do a lot of advising. So you mentioned agility. So one of the things we do, because we have experience running a startup, I mean, we literally we're on the cusp of an A round of our startup before COVID hit. We go out and we talk with earlier stage companies that are technology driven. And we say, look, here's our proposal for you. You can't afford our experience level if you had to pay for it. It doesn't matter who your lawyers are, whether they're your mother, your brother, your daughter, whoever. There's a built-in subconscious conflict of interest, always, because lawyers are judged based on generating revenues in their place of employment. You can have do all the great things you want, but the law firm, when they go through on your billings for the year, that's what they're judging you on. What are your billings for the year? Which means there's an inherent conflict. So what our proposal to these companies were, let us become your advisors. We're going to give you a level of advice in terms of business-driven IP advice that you will never get from a lawyer because A, they don't have the business experience, and B, there's this inherent conflict of interest. And we'll do that for equity. So if your company is not a success, we make nothing, absolutely nothing. So I have only one goal, which is to give you the best advice to make you successful. We have nothing to gain other than your success. So that's when there's about a dozen companies, not all are on LinkedIn, about a dozen companies. And I think we have a couple of them that are likely to go to unicorn status.
Wow, that's awesome.
Which is great. And it's a lot of fun. And, it's very hard if you haven't raised money in a startup company. It's very hard to understand what that involves. The extreme highs and lows of entrepreneurship at that level where you're raising money, highs are very brief, followed by, depression and anxiety about where that next check is going to come from and how you're going to pay your team. Having someone who understands that and can explain, why should you peel off $5,000 of that lifeblood in order to make an investment in IP? Exactly. And the answer is never the same because it depends on what they want. What's their plan, right? So understanding it from the business perspective, most importantly, but having the IP expertise, that's really something that I don't think is very common. There's very few people out there that can give that kind of advice. So that's been a lot of fun and it's enriching because you get to see these entrepreneurs as they're growing. It's really fantastic. So those are the main areas. We just started a branding business. We're working with a client that we were doing advising on, and they have a really cool product. They're making pet carriers and pet houses and things like that. And we're looking at their stuff like, wouldn't it be really cool if I just bought a Mercedes and I can get my pet seat in the same leather as my interior with a Mercedes logo? Or if I'm tailgating, I could have my dog in old gear from my university and have a pet carrier at the university. And he said, yeah, that's a really good idea. So he hired us and we have a long-term exclusive arrangement where we own the branding relationships for him. And our model is to partner up with others in the space, right? I don't want a big headcount. My partner and I, we don't want big headcounts because it turns out you don't need to. You could build collaborative teams that contract and grow at whatever scale we need at the very highest level. But the advantage for our clients is that we're not carrying a huge payroll that we have to push you to pay us on. We can afford to take bets and invest in our success and work with others who take a similar view that they're willing to bet in their success as well. So you find those people. So anyway, so that's what Cerebral Assets is. It's truly about cerebral assets.
Well, Virtual Patent Gateway, I created the name at Busch Garden in Williamsburg.
Nice.
And I'm going
roller coaster.
Yeah, so I left in 2019, December, close to the end of the year. So I decided that I want to take a 3-month break before I start a new journey. I knew that I was going to go into consulting. There were people that said to me, how long is this adventure of yours going to take? I said, I don't know, for as long as it will. And if it doesn't go well, guess what? I have marketability.
Yeah,
people will hire me, right? It took 4 days for you to go. I don't think that it would take me 4 days.
That's good. That's why we connect, because people might call that cockiness, but I've decided that's not cockiness. That's just confidence, right? It's confidence in your own abilities that you've built to know that everything you've done has been additive to what was there before. And you build a skill set that just sets you apart from other people who have gone through the Groundhog Day path of life.
Yeah, so Virtual Patent Gateway was supposed to be called Virtual Patent Paralegal Alliance. So I did my due diligence, blah, blah, blah. And then I was getting ready to submit. I was at Busch Garden, took my mom there. We decided to take a chill weekend and spend the new year there. I got a call from one of my former attorneys. So most of my business are word of mouth. I only have one person that I do not know and that search on internet and find. Most of the time, I don't take internet business because I don't know who they are. It's liability.
Right.
So I was like, so this former attorney of mine was like, I heard the word on the street is that you are going to start a consulting business and filing PTAB cases. When are you going to start? I said, well, I am going to do it in March. He was like, do you think that you could start sooner? I said, well, what do you have in mind? He was like, I have 4 cases that I need you to work on. We are waiting for you to file. I'm like, you're waiting for my business to form? Let me see what I can do. So I've taken like paralegal courses. And so I know how to do like file LLC. And I know like all those things, right? Because it's part of the paralegal program. So I went on and I was going to do it myself. I did all the due diligence. That was not a duplication of the Virtual Patent Paralegal Alliance. But then somehow when I filed in Virginia, when I submit, it rejected it. I have no idea why. For whatever reason, it's just didn't happen. I was like, oh God, I took up, like basically went on Webster's on dictionaries. Like, I know that I need to be a virtual. I know I need to be a patent. So what is the other choices? Word choices. So went online, claim constructions, right? So went online, typing everything. It was like, Galaxy? No. So somehow I look at the word gateway and I really like it because this is an opening of a market, So I was like, let me see what I can do about this. So there's Virtual Patent Gateway. That's how it's formed.
It's really hard. You know what? People don't appreciate how hard it is to come up with a name.
Oh God, it's really hard.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
So yeah, that's kind of how it went. And at first it was like the beginning I was going to do like more generic because I need to pay bills, right?
Right.
It's like I came from a very, humble beginning. So that means that if I don't have my paycheck, I'm going to get into my scarcity mindset. Yeah. You probably know a little bit about that before you become like big name Jamie, right?
Yeah, right.
So it's the struggle between the scarcity and being like growth, taking risks when I have all kinds of anxiety. The first year I decided that I want to do everything for everybody. It did not go well. It's like people pleasing and the more you do that, the more people are willing to take advantage of you. And then I decided that I don't really want to work for other people. And why am I doing this to myself? And at no point in my career until now have I started thinking about fulfillment. Because that's not like, when you're not coming from like a rich dad, you kind of have to figure out, okay, I gotta take care of my mom, I gotta do this, I gotta pay the bills, do all these things. How do I make it all happen without like background? I didn't even know what P&L was when I first started. I was like, I think I need to learn about business. So I went to apply for the Tory Burch Foundation Fellowship and also the FedEx Small Business. The first time I was on video that I had to do pitches, I look at the camera and cry. Like, I cannot.
It's crazy, right?
But 5 years later, part of it is like I've met along the way some really amazing people. And there's this brand strategist, his name is Sasha Strauss, and I took his course on Simon Sinek's platform. And at the end of it, he saw the potential, but he also saw the lack of confidence. So he said that I am going, for 1 minute during the end of that course, he said to me, he goes, I like what you said. I think you have a lot of potential, but I'm going to correct your language. And the language, he said that we can't believe in you unless we hear you believe in yourself.
100%.
100%. So
100%.
He suggested I go to Toastmaster because I need to pitch, right?
Great.
Yeah. So, and could not find a Toastmaster in the local chapter that would work during COVID that's near my house and everything. And I'm like, you know what? I have a different idea. So I talked to my team, my event pro. I was like, how hard is it to do a podcast? And I don't know. We could do that, I guess. We are in year 3 for this one, Virtual Water Cooler Chat. We're closing with 95 episodes at the end of the year. And yours is going to come in January or February. If I tell myself like 5 years ago, I would do all of these things, just like you, that all of the things that, like, of course there's mishaps from time to time. It's like, oh, why are you guys doing this to me? And then, it's like, I would tell my team, it's like, I sent them a document and it was AI generated. It's like gibberish. I didn't have chance to review it. I was like, can you guys please review this? Not one single person came back and questioned me. I finally looked at it. I was like, I think that we need to have a talk. You should challenge me. If I'm sending you some crap, the first thing that I need to get is from you is, what the hell are you sending us?
I learned the hard way when I had FlipTix, right? We had a staff. I had a staff of people, even at Sony, I ran big teams, but they didn't work. Actually, I wasn't signing their paychecks, right? They were working for Sony or they were working for outside firms, but I was managing big groups. But now I had people who I was CEO and chairman. I mean, they work for me. And what I didn't appreciate was that the natural tendency back to this sheeple mentality is that when I would say something, it was never intended to be the gospel. It was intended to provoke discussion, but the employees would take it as gospel. That makes for very bad work product, right? You need to, I think team collaboration is how you get great product. So what I wound up doing was I had to keep on telling them, look, I want you to question me, right? What you were just saying, I need you to question me. So we did an offsite and I gave them a book. Have you ever read the book Startup Nation?
No, but I will.
Okay, show me the book Startup Nation. This is really helpful. So what the book Startup Nation is about why is Israel the most entrepreneurial country on the planet? There's actually a very real reason, and it aligns if based on what I said, you can see that there's an alignment from the perspective. It's about not being afraid to take risks and the unnecessary chain of command. In Israel in particular, the chain of command is far less important than in the rest of the Western world. And the reason is that the chain of command is a term that comes out of the military, right? There's a reason it comes out of the military, and it translates to the corporate world. So you think about, why do you need a chain of command in the military? And it's because typically armies are sent somewhere else to go fight. So we need a chain of command because we need the privates on the front line pointing that way, not running that way. So by having a chain of command, we're able to separate all these things. So you can't talk to the general. You have to talk to this guy who talks to that guy, who talks to that guy, because fundamentally it's about discipline and keeping you facing that way. And in Israel, they don't have that issue because their armies aren't sent elsewhere to fight. They're sent to defend. We're putting aside whatever people's these days, whatever their political views. The Israeli army is fighting in and around Israel. And if you turn around and you run that out of the way, everybody you know and love is going to die. So that means I don't need a chain of command to keep you pointing that way. You're going to point that way because you want to protect everyone you know and love. So because of that, that then translates into the business world where a first year can question the CEO. So I gave him this book and saying, if you want to work with me successfully, read this book. I don't want you to regard my statements as facts. I want you to challenge them and question them. I will always make a decision. Like you, never hesitate to make a decision. Otherwise, you're never going to get anywhere in business, but always be willing to change your decision in the face of a better argument. And that doesn't mean telling me that I'm wrong. It means telling me I'm wrong. Here's why. You can't just tell someone you're wrong. I disagree with you. Okay, explain to me why. If you can explain it, well, then I say, you know what? You're right. If you just tell someone they're wrong, they defend, they become defensive. Well, no, of course I'm not wrong. But if you can explain it, and that really translates into the business. And when you want to run a team and you want your team, getting them to understand that I want your criticisms, but you have to explain them, which you should in general in life. Explain your criticisms. If you say, I didn't like that meal. Okay, well, why didn't you like that meal? Well, just everything. Well, that's nonsense. No, you didn't like that meal because your soup came out cold. Or you didn't like that meal because something was well done. Or whatever it is, give reason. So if you can instill that in your people, that's where you get a great team. That's not, nobody wants to surround themselves. Oh, plenty of people do like to surround themselves with yes men, but I don't, not me. And I'm based on our conversation. I don't think you either. We want people we are imperfect beings. The only way to get better is by having people point out your faults in places where you can improve. And
so the reason why I have to send you a different link is because I have a corporate, a VPG account, but I also have my personal account. I haven't used my personal Zoom email for a long time. I forgot my password. I haven't set it up and everything. So the other day I was talking to my event pro. I was like, because we are running site checking course from 2 to 3:30. We're testing an idea. So we have an on-demand course, and I collaborate with an attorney who teaches, and she has been in paralegal education for over 2 decades for major law firms. So she partnered with me for almost 5 years now, pretty much from the beginning. Because when I came out, I was like, oh God, I have to do site checking. I hate site checking. At the firm, I could have somebody else to do it, but I don't have that. And I need my team to know how to do it. So that was the very first investment in training that I got, and I paired up with her. At first, it was training my team. Then I was like, you know what? Other firms find out that I was doing it. I was like, you know what? I could just have them pay for it and also train my team. Why not? So I started running webinars. And then one time, the instructor, she's in San Diego at that time, and there was a power outage. So the webinar actually it didn't go forward. And as the host, I'm responsible. I mean, that's where the anxiety comes in, right? Because that's not what I had to deal with when I was at the firm. Other people owes problem, not mine. I just have to deal with the aftermath, but I didn't have to shoulder the responsibility. So I had to apologize to a lot of law firms. And then that instructor and I decided that, we could probably come up with a pretty good idea if we don't have to be teaching over and over again. And what if we do this, neither one of us has to be there. So I said on-demand courses. Now that was year 2 of VPG. I don't know how to set up like the background, doing on-demand platform. So I've always been working with young people. I have a lot of attorney friends. They have kids, computer science major, artists, whatever. So we kind of like through test and error, we used Teachable and then came up with our own on-demand courses. And it has been 3.5 years. And now it actually started to gain traction. I mean, I'm a small business, so that's really amazing. And we are able to help like law firms. So we just had like a major law firm that had us train their associates because they were like, well, can we do CLE? I'm like, I don't see why not. Let me go ahead and submit application. So I did for Virginia. And then that firm actually submitted CLE for other states. So that gave me idea. I was like, maybe we should do that. We have the recording. So we just need to read the fine print. I know how to do that. And if it doesn't work, I'll just appeal the decision. That's what we will do. So that was what we were doing, testing it. Because I submitted the application for Virginia CLE, also New York and California. So that was like for attorneys. Our target audience were generally not attorneys. So it was a small class and I had my event pro. I'm like, I'm going to talk to Jaime. I don't have time for this right now. Can you guys take care of this? So I have a 24-year-old, our creative engineer, and then the event pro run this program. And when I was going through this stuff and I had some discussion with my team about my expectations and how to manage it. For example, if we need to go through and do second review because I'm seeing some errors and we need to do that. And I'm sure that you have no intention and you don't want to be on the hook to do this. And I like to safeguard it by having a second review so that we can actually protect the integrity of the work product and everything. So that really went out really well. I asked her, I said that I have this preset Zoom link, but I think it's running out from this. Can we actually run the two things at the same time? She was like, no. And I said, but I have multiple computers. Actually, it's the account, not the computer. So she was like, let me go generate a link and have Jaime get on this. So that's how it went. But on that note, oh my God, we had such a great time. When I come to California or you come to DC, you let me know. And
absolutely,
definitely have to. This has been such an amazing time.
Absolutely. It was so great to catch up.